Peegs.com's Jared Kelly, Matt Weaver, game week, Indiana football. The first under new head coach Kurt Cignetti. Matt, we've finally made it. I said this yesterday, but it feels like this offseason has felt like 5 years, just with everything that's gone on with the portal, the coaching staff turnover, and everything. But we're finally here. We're through fall camp. Indiana's on to game prep. Uh, have you had a chance to sort of wrap your head around all that's happened this offseason?
I guess a little bit. It's obviously been a while since there's been a coaching change in IU football. And the last one, there was no search. They went from Kevin Wilson was fired and Tom Allen was hired the same day, and I was on interim basis, but it became permanent, obviously. And you didn't have the portal back then. You didn't have all the stuff that goes on now, so it was kind of low key as a coaching change can be. Obviously, this one, you had the search, and then you had the roster turnover, which was extraordinary. And then you had do regular recruiting this summer for the 25 class, while you're still doing portal recruiting. So yeah, it's been a whirlwind. And like you said, it does feel like feels like it's been forever since that first press conference with Kurt Cignetti back in December when he was hired. But we're far like that. Like he said, it's here, it's game week. And so now you can just kind of turn the focus to football.
Mm. Indiana made it through fall camp and obviously through the summer, mostly unscathed with injuries. Obviously we've done content on this on the site, but Nick Kidwell, the big story coming out of fall camp, his injury, season-ending knee injury. I just wanted to touch on that off the top. Obviously Bray Lynch and Tyler Stevens and Drew Evans are the three guys still battling for those two guard spots. Just how impactful is Kidwell going down? He's a seventh-year guy, projected to start. Had a lot of familiarity with the Shanahan offense. Just how impactful is that?
Well, I think it's pretty impactful. I mean, if you look, Kidwell didn't practice in the spring. Obviously, he was injured last year. Didn't practice spring, and I would say, and he was immediately put in as a starter at right guard. And you could pretty much say that some are written in pencil. That one looked like he was written in pen. Barring an injury, and unfortunately that's what happened. Barring an injury, he was going to be the guy at right guard. They only had 14 scholarship linemen coming into fall camp. You're down to 13, and five of those, the four freshmen and Austin Barrett, have basically four of them not played in college football. And Barrett might have got a couple of snaps that not significant at all. So you basically have eight guys who have been in college football for more than a year, and a few of those haven't played much. So it hurts from a starting standpoint, and it hurts your depth because they're a little bit thin O-line. The good thing, I guess, the silver lining is it happened 2 weeks, basically before the first game instead of 2 weeks into the season. So it gives you time to adjust, to kind of start getting somebody else ramped up. And I mean, Bob Bosa does a great job of getting guys prepared, but now you can kind of shift your focus and try to get this other guy or guys, like you said, ready to play one of those, the right guard spots. So the timing at least was beneficial. But yeah, it's a tough blow. I mean, it's not something that you can't overcome, but it is a tough blow for the O-line and for the offense.
Mhm. Yesterday, we had touched on this a little bit in our Peaks take right after we heard from Cignetti during his Monday availability. But he did mention that he didn't throw this out there for no reason. That all three of Stevens, Lynch, and Evans had been taking snaps at center, and you had mentioned that something that was kind of interesting. I thought that was pretty interesting too, because Cignetti is not one to just kind of say stuff on a whim. Do you think there's any chance that maybe they slide Mike Kadick out to where he's been playing the last few years at guard and use a Bray Lynch who's been practicing there throughout the spring and summer at center maybe?
Yeah, you could. I like I said, to me, when you say all three guys can snap, that indicates that there's a possibility that they could be the center. And maybe if you feel like, I think the tough thing is the biggest thing you sold Mike Kadick on to come back was we're going to play you at center and it's going to make you more marketable for the next level for the NFL. So, that's kind of tough. But, Kadick's a team guy. I think he understands. I mean, I would guess he might be disappointed. And I'm not saying he's not going to play center. I'm just saying that when you throw that out there, we both, it kind of perked both our ears up. I immediately thought, okay, there's a chance one of these guys could be at center at some point in either in the game or the season. And Mike Kadick goes to he's played both guard spots, mainly left guard, I think recently. So But I would think he could go to right guard if you needed him there. But yeah, it's hard to say, but it wouldn't shock me to see that happen at some point. And if you got a comfortable lead, maybe you stick one of those guys in there. Like I said, we said this yesterday. The first two games give you, if they go how you expect them to, give you an opportunity to kind of experiment, to almost not treat. I mean, you want to win them, but almost like a spring game or a scrimmage where you can kind of move guys around and see what works and see what doesn't. Obviously, not forsaking the chance to win the game, but if you get to a point where you feel comfortable, maybe you can try some things to see how guys look.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about this year's schedule that Indiana might not have had the luxury of previous years playing Western Kentucky, Louisville, those kind of teams where you get these three non-conference teams that you should beat pretty handily at home. It really does give you an opportunity, and like I had said yesterday, I think because Signetti was pretty non-committal about Lynch, Evans, Stevens. He said we'll see who we trot onto the field for the first series. I would not be surprised if you see all three of those guys play in the three non-conference games. Give all three guys a shot to see who can, really solidify themselves. So we'll kind of see how that plays out. But the rest of fall camp, Matt, everything we've heard coming out of fall camp, obviously the coaches are going to pump out, a lot of confidence, a lot of good things about the team out of fall camp. But aside from the Kidwell injury, it seems to be, everything is looking on the up and up for IU.
Yeah, they seem to come through pretty healthy. I mean, I think other than Andrew DePepe, if I'm saying that right, who was the walk-on from Michigan State to transfer, I don't know that they have any, and obviously Kidwell, but any other than that, any really serious injuries. And I'm not sure DePepe was going to factor much this year as far as the rotation at edge. Maybe he would have worked his way up, but early on, it didn't seem that way. But they seem to pretty. You asked him about cornerback, and I know JoJo Johnson got hurt a couple weeks ago, but it sounds like if he's not ready by week one, it shouldn't be too long after that. He didn't give a timetable, but he strongly indicated that they could be at full strength for the first week. So yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing about fall camp is health. Obviously you want to get better and implement and install your systems. And I think they feel good about that, but can you come through and healthy, especially to your main guys? And other than Kidwell, as we mentioned, that was a blow. This seems like a pretty healthy squad.
Mm-hmm. So for the sake of not doing position overviews again, because we've done tons of that, and we can link that stuff over on the sites. But I did want to get into sort of the different we obviously heard from different players throughout fall camp. We heard from the coordinators, heard from Signetti a lot. Were there any 2-3 players that really stood out to you as guys who really got talked about a lot? Because I know for me, D'Angelo Pons, and we've texted about this. If everything they're saying, because obviously we didn't get to watch a lot of fall camp, just the early individual drills and stuff, but everything they've been saying that the staff has been putting out about Pons, if that translates this fall, he could be an absolute stud. Obviously we'll see how that translates, but anybody else, Matt, besides Pons, that kind of caught your ear?
Well, I mean, you always heard defensively, and he didn't play. He practiced in the spring. I think he was coming back from injury with Jalen Walker, the linebacker, and I think Sinetti described him as maybe one of the fastest guys on the team. He can run sideline to sideline, and obviously we saw what Aiden Fisher did in the spring game. He was fantastic. So on defense, in Kamara, I think Brian Haynes said basically he's out there every play. Like he's just one of those guys that they can lean on. Offensively, I would say not really. The three running backs, they seem to really like, and he mentioned yesterday, Kalon Black, Justice Ellison, and Tyson Lawton. And I think those three guys, we saw what they could do in the spring. They were impressive. And then Curtis Rourke, I mean, for him a couple weeks ago to come out and say he's not named him as a starter, but let's be honest, it's the writing's on the wall. But he came out and said he has clearly and significantly separated himself. May not be quoting that exactly right, but it sounded like he put a pretty good amount of distance between him and everybody else, and really in particular Taven Jackson, because that was who he's really competing with, for the quarterback job. So, those are the names. I mean, at receiver, there's so many guys. I don't know that they really focused on one. I mean, he did mention, Jeff Rabjohns asked about Omar Cooper, and he said, if he translates what he does on the practice field. So it sounds like he's doing well on the practice field. And Omar's a guy that I think is a chance. I've kind of mentioned him as a possible sleeper, even though that position's deep, to kind of have a breakout year. So those are the names off the top of my head kind of come to mind.
Mhm. I wanted to hit on receiver really quick because I was kind of thinking about this a couple days ago. We haven't heard much about receiver, just that the room is coming along, and early in the spring, and then coming into fall, Cignetti kind of sounded like he had some concerns there. We heard him, kind of publicly pushing Donovan McCulley to give a little bit more in practice. EJ Williams couldn't stay on the field. Don't know his. We assume that he's back on the field and he'll be ready for week one. But it was kind of interesting. I thought that we didn't hear too much about receiver other than, what was asked. We heard a little bit about Elijah Surratt, who's, expected to have a huge role. Omar Cooper, who's, like you mentioned, a sleeper pick. Did that intrigue you at all a little bit that, with as much talent as IU has a receiver, that we didn't hear too much about, this guy standing out, that guy standing out?
Yeah, maybe a little. Yeah, I think the most interesting comment I think I heard about receiver was at Big Ten Media Day in the breakout session when he talked to us, and somebody asked him about receiver, and I can't remember the question, but he was basically like, we could handle a key injury at that spot. Like you could lose. Obviously, you hope it doesn't happen, but one of your top guys, and you'd still be okay. So maybe a little bit. They didn't mention anybody specifically, but I just think it's a room where there's so many guys. Like I said before, I think Don McCauley could be as impactful or more impactful than he was last year, and his numbers could actually go down just because there's just so many guys there that you got to kind of pick your poison when you're the defense when they line up. So, and I think they're going to rotate a bunch of guys at that spot and keep them fresh. So, I mean, I guess maybe a little surprising nobody was mentioned, but to me it doesn't mean that it's not a good, because they've mentioned many times it's a very talented group.
Mm-hmm. All right. That'll do it for fall camp. If you guys want to check out our position previews, we'll have much more. We can include all the links and stuff over on the site. We covered a lot of that in our fall camp preview podcast. If you guys want to go check that out. All right, let's jump into the schedule, Matt. We haven't talked about this much at all up until now, and I feel like going into game week is a good time to really dive into this. Very favorable schedule, maybe IU's most favorable schedule since, before the East-West Big Ten divisions. Obviously, you still have to play Michigan, you still have to play Ohio State, but you get 8 home games this year, and you get a lot of teams that are, in a very similar position to IU with coaching changes, roster turnover. 8 home games, 4 away. You get that Northwestern game that could be a total toss-up at Evanston on their lakeside temporary field. So this is a schedule, Matt, that really sets up nicely for IU to start strong. And I know a lot of IU fans are dreaming high and hoping big things. But there is a legitimate scenario where IU is, close to bowl eligibility by the time they get to the second half of the season. For you, this schedule has to be one of, if not the most favorable you've seen since you've been covering IU, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that at least definitely, like you said, they went to the East-West divisions, because obviously every year you almost started 0-3 when you had Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State on your schedule, and then Indiana for a number of years, and I always thought I thought it was foolish. They would schedule a Louisville or Cincinnati, so you were basically scheduling it's almost like you schedule another conference game, because those teams could compete in the Big Ten and beat several teams in your league. So this year, the schedule in non-conference is the way it should be. It's 3 games where you should be able to get wins, not have to play your guys for 4 quarters, get some guys some snaps who normally wouldn't get snaps, and get halfway to bowl eligibility. And I know, Kirk said, hey, the goal is not 6-6, and I get that, and that's the right way to think. But when you won 9 games in the last 3 years, 6-6 looks pretty darn good. So the schedule lays out, like you said, you play Michigan, Ohio State. Those are going to be tough games. You get a bye week in between them, which is interesting. 2 bye weeks this year in the season, which does not happen very often in college football. So, but it lays out well, and there is a legit shot to be 5-1 or possibly 6-0 going into that first bye week in mid-October. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but the 3 non-conference games, and you have 3 very winnable games in the Big Ten. Even if you can get to 5 or 6 wins, you're playing with house money. You really are for the rest of the season. You're playing with house money, and I'm not saying the pressure's off, but it's not like you have your back. It wasn't like last year where you had to go 4-0 over the last 4 weeks or whatever it was to even have a chance at a bowl game. So it does lay out nicely for IU this year.
Mm-hmm. The first 2 games of the season against FIU and Western Illinois at home are two of the arguably easiest games you could have scheduled. FIU, ESPN's FPI had them, I think, third worst coming into this season in all of FBS. I think Football Focus might have had them last in the FBS, FIU. And then Western Illinois, they haven't won a game since I think the 2022 season. They went 0-11 last year, 0-11 the year before. So that is, arguably the worst FCS team as well. Those two games, Matt, you hope IU can get out of there without much trouble. Early blowouts, put it on early and get the backups in. Just those two first games though are going to be critical, even if they are not the caliber of opponent that IU is going to see. Just what are you looking for out of those first two games?
Well, week one, I mean, there's going to be some hiccups. It's the first game. You got a bunch of new players. What I'm looking for, and I kind of mentioned yesterday when we talked after the press conference, is can you impose your will on teams that you should impose your will on? And to me, Florida National, I mean, I'm not saying they're exactly, but this is similar to the Akron game last year. Now Florida National is going to have some guys who can run. They're a South Florida team. They're going to have some of those guys from down there who maybe were overlooked by the bigger schools, but they played at good programs down in that part of the country. To me, though, they got a quarterback who can be a little bit dangerous. But you should be able to up front on both sides of the ball, I would think, impose your will and kind of dominate the line of scrimmage and make life very, very difficult for them. The next week, you mentioned Western Illinois is just it's a really poor program right now, and it's coming from the FCS. So those are two games where I would think, especially with Western Illinois, mid third quarter, if not sooner, that game's pretty much kind of over. Florida National, maybe a smidge later, but you should be emptying the bench, I would hope, late third quarter into the fourth quarter in that game and getting some guys playing time. But yeah, this is where you need to come out and, I at times under Tom Allen, I felt like he didn't try to, step on people's necks when the few times they had that chance. I don't get that sense. I think Kirk Cinetti's going to do that. He doesn't strike me as a guy. Now, he's not going to play guys past where they need to be played, but he's also going to try to put away teams when he has a chance to put them away and kind of beat them down, for lack of a better term, when that's what should happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the biggest thing coming out of these games, keep your guys healthy.
Yeah.
And then obviously, try to keep the playbook as vanilla as you can, not show too much, and then obviously get out of there with two wins to start the season. The UCLA game, this is one I've had circled since the schedule came out. This is going to be a huge, I think, litmus test for IU, not because UCLA is overly dominant, but just because they're it's a first road game, first Big Ten game, and UCLA is in a very similar position to IU. Now, I know UCLA, obviously, they hired Eric Bieniemy, who was, a longtime NFL offensive coordinator. So that was a big hire for them. But Deshaun Foster is highly unproven, never been a head coach at any level of football. And we saw what he did at Big Ten Media Days up there on the podium. That was not too great. But going on the road, going to the West Coast for your first Big Ten road game is not going to be an easy thing. The Rose Bowl has never been, a huge, home field advantage for UCLA, and there are a ton of IU alumni over on the West Coast, which I think, I think it will surprise some people how many IU fans end up at that game. But this is one I've really had scheduled for a long time now. If IU can pull this one out, and you're heading into that Charlotte game, which you should win, you're looking at 4-0 coming out of 4 weeks there, Matt, the first 4 weeks of the season. That UCLA game, I would not be surprised if IU kind of tries to throw, a little, not everything it has at UCLA, but really, really open up the playbook there. Because if you can get that game, then you're really rolling at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. I mean, it's, you can lose that game and still get the bowl eligibility, but obviously it makes the road a little bit tougher. You get that game and you're like you said, you should be 4-0. That's why I said a 5-1, 6-0 start and before the first bye week is very possible for this program, and it would be huge. And UCLA, this is not a team that's expected to contend for the title, the Big Ten. But they're going to have some talent. I mean, Chip Kelly was the coach there. They have some good players. They have guys that get drafted, but it is a new coaching staff. A guy who's, like you said, has never been a head coach. And then you have to factor in the travel across the country. Indiana, they've made some trips, but I mean, going to Lincoln, Nebraska is not the same as going all the way out to LA, and playing. But the atmosphere should not be overwhelming. I'm sure it'll be cool to play in the Rose Bowl and to see the backdrop of the mountains and all that around there. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing it myself. but this is a winnable game, and I'm with you. I think this is a game where you're not throwing the kitchen sink at them, but maybe you have some wrinkles to really try to go out there and get this win, so you can come back and you know, the first finish off the first third of your season, or sorry, first quarter of your season 3-0, the first quarter, and like Kevin Wilson used to say, and if you can do that, everything really sets up well for this program to get back to a bowl game.
Mm-hmm. The Charlotte game, like we said, both of us are predicting a win there. We'll see. The UCLA is really a toss-up, but even if you're 3-1 going into the thick of the Big Ten play, 3-1 halfway to bowl eligibility after a third of the season is kind of where you want to be if you're IU at this point. With a first year coaching staff. So we'll kind of gloss over the Charlotte game a little bit because that should be kind of on par with FIU. Charlotte is a little bit better than FIU is predicted to be this season. So that might be a little bit of a tougher matchup. But then you get Maryland at home and Northwestern on the road. Two games at IU, again, toss-up games that you could be really looking, back on when the season's over is, man, we could have had that game, or games that, really push IU to another level to maybe the 7-8 win mark there. With the Maryland game especially, it's going to be interesting because, obviously Talia Tagovailoa started 3 years there. He was, prolific. Now they got a new quarterback. Mike Loxley has that program rolling a little bit. But Indiana, getting them at home, it shouldn't be too much of a, they might be underdogs going into that game, but I don't think they'll be as big of underdogs as people might give them credit for.
Yeah, I mean, it's a game. I mean, last year they got their doors blown off by Maryland. I was at that game over in College Park, but they've been competitive with Maryland. It's a team that they've beaten multiple times over the last several years. So it's the one thing is Mike Loxley's an offensive guy. Offensively they're going to be a challenge to deal with, and then they're gonna have some good players. I mean, they recruit well, and they get a lot of guys from that Washington D.C. that Baltimore DMV area, and those guys are they get athletes, guys who can run, make plays, are explosive. The quarterback situation obviously is vastly different than it's been the last 3 years. So, that, like, once again, it's a winnable game. This is a game where on paper you can compete with these guys. Now it's just, can you go out and get the win, win one of these. I would expect this to be a close game, kind of go down to the wire. And obviously last year that was not great for Indiana. That's one of the things I expect to see different this year under Kirk Cinetti is these close games, making those plays at the crucial time in the fourth quarter to pull out a win.
Mm-hmm. Gun to your head, Matt. UCLA, Maryland. Does IU walk out of that 1-1, 2-0? What do you think there?
I think at worst 1-1, but I like their chances to go 2-0 in those games. I mean, I really do. And maybe and people on the site the last couple of years, I've kind of been not overly optimistic about the program because I kind of saw where it was headed. I think this team has a chance. These are games that they can win. And I feel like Kurt Signetti, you look at his background, it's not just what he said. I look at what he's done. And this is a guy that has proven time and time again. He can come in, he can affect change immediately. And, I think that's going to happen. I think these are the kind of games where the coaching and the little things matter in the heat of the moment that we just haven't had. Indiana hasn't had the last few years, and we're going to see that, starting this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of where my head is at with especially with the first two Big Ten games with UCLA and Maryland, is if IU can go, these are two teams that are sort of in the same tier as IU, just both in terms of what they've done recently and then recruiting and all that. If IU can go 2-0 in those two games and kind of set themselves on a different level and prove that okay, we're not in the same tier as everyone thinks we are. This season, I think that's when you can really, see IU get rolling at that point. Now, 2-0 obviously has never been easy for IU to do to start Big Ten play. But if IU can do that, I mean, you're really playing like with house money, like you had said previously there. I think if you go 1-1 in those two games, I think that's respectable, depending on how the game results shake out and the performance and whatnot. I think 1-1 is totally I think what a lot of people are expecting. 2-0 though, at that point in the year, I think you gotta feel really good about IU going into the Northwestern game. let's go to that Northwestern game, Matt, in Evanston. Everyone wants to talk about their temporary field and all that, but this is a Northwestern team that's coming off an 8-win season. They got a little bit lucky last year with how the results broke and how their schedule broke down. But this is a Northwestern team that has a transfer quarterback this year. A couple new pieces. At different skill positions. The defense is always going to be solid. David Braun, the head coach, is a defensive-minded coach, so you have to feel good about Northwestern's defense. But that's another game I've circled on my schedule as one that IU really needs to take if it's going to look back and say this is what got us to bowl eligibility.
Yeah, and I've been through. I mean, I started in 2008, the year after Bill Lynch led Indiana to a bowl game as the interim coach. And I'm not saying it's going to be, but I've seen this before where, and they were different circumstances. Obviously, Terry Hepner dying and Pat Fitzgerald getting fired because of the hazing stuff that was going on. It's two different things, but it's still similar in that you lose your head coach, right before the season, and you got to go with somebody else. And you play. There's a lot of emotion. I'm not saying they're not going to be good this year. You just don't know. There were special circumstances for that team last year, just like there were special circumstances for Indiana in 2007. And the interim thing ended up not working out. Maybe it'll work out great for Northwestern. One thing that's interesting, you mentioned the temporary stadium. You're from up there. I've been to games at the Ryan Field where they, the stadium they just tore down. They're going to, build a new one. And the wind off the lake can be absolutely brutal. I mean, even when you're sitting in the stands, and this is going to be a place that's not really going to have like big concrete stands. I'm curious how the weather's going to be because I think this is going to be right on the lake, if I'm not mistaken, literally sitting right there by the lake. This could be an interesting game as far as weather. Now it's early October, maybe it won't be bad, but that's one of the things I'm really interested in seeing is just what does the weather look like that day? Because it could be a day where throwing the football may be really, really difficult because you're playing with nothing to block the wind, and you've got really strong gusts coming off that lake. Like I said, you live there and you know about it. But I've sat in that stadium and frozen my butt off because of that lake effect wind that you get up there. So, but it's a game that I like Indiana's chances. But we'll see. Northwestern's a really unknown. They lost their quarterback. I think he went to Iowa. Mm-hmm. Their start Brendan Sullivan. You said they got a transfer, so it'll be interesting. It's just rosters turnover. It'll be interesting to see how they play coming out of the gate. Now that it's kind of settled back down and there's not that emotion of we're playing for ourselves. We lost our coach and all that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Coming out of Northwestern, Indiana gets its first bye week of the season, and then it's on to Nebraska and Washington. I believe the Nebraska game is homecoming weekend. We'll lump those two games together, Matt, because I also think you can kind of put Nebraska and Washington in the same tier. Now, obviously, Washington was in the CFP national title game last year, but once again, coaching turnover. They hired Jed Fish, who I think was a terrific hire for Washington. All the work he did to turn around Arizona last year. But Nebraska and Washington, both teams that are kind of looking to kind of really establish themselves in the Big Ten. Matt Rule at Nebraska, he had him one win away from bowl eligibility last year. Now, if you ask Nebraska fans, that's 5 and 7 seed is not even close to where they expect to be. But when you look at these two games, Matt, you get both of them in Bloomington, which you have to give IU a little bit of a boost there, and especially like we said coming out of the first half of the schedule, if IU can get out of there 5-1, 6-0, and you're heading into Nebraska, Washington, you're feeling really good. With these two games, do you see them as sort of maybe a a season defining 2-game stretch there?
Yeah, and I mean Nebraska is obviously I would think a little bit ahead of Washington because their staff's been there. Now they announced they're starting that freshman Raiola, that he was a stud quarterback. And he's obviously incredibly talented, but he is a freshman, so there's going to be some growing pains. I thought Matt Rule was a great hire, and I still do. I know it's been a little bit slower than they thought, but I think I could see Nebraska taking a pretty significant step forward this year. And then Washington, I want to say it was like 41 of their top 44, and they're too deep or something. I mean, they lost. It was amazing how much they've lost in the turnover. I mean, Jed Fish talked. We were sitting there listening to him at the Big Ten Media Day. So these are I would probably put Washington a little bit higher on what I would consider that winnability. I think they're both winnable games just because of where their program's at compared to Nebraska. But these are two similar teams talent wise. I would think they'll be fairly similar. And you get a bye week before that Nebraska game, so you get a couple weeks preparing. You're hoping you're coming off a win, so you're coming in with a lot of good kind of mojo and feeling good about yourself. So, but if you come this game 5-1. Let's just say you come in 5-1, 6-0. Even if you split, obviously you're in a great position. But yeah, I think you can get these two wins. it is kind of season defining because you could be at 7, possibly 8 wins. Worst case, when I say worst case, if you're 4-2 in the first 6, you're bowl eligibility after these 2 games. So this is a big stretch for Indiana. These first 2 games after after the first bye week.
Mm-hmm. Coming out of Nebraska and Washington, IU goes to East Lansing, where they've surprisingly had more success, at Spartan Stadium in recent times than some people might think. We remember back to, I think it was a 2022 season when IU was, really looked to be, had hit kind of the ground, spiraled all the way down, and then they went into East Lansing, pulled out a win there. Michigan State, once again, another Big Ten team that has a lot of coaching turnover, a lot of roster turnover. I think it was like 24, 22 new incoming transfers this year. They have a new quarterback, Aiden Childs, who comes from Oregon State, following Jonathan Smith to Michigan State. This is another game, Matt. I also have circled on my calendar. I have a lot of games circled on my calendar, but this one especially. Michigan State is very much in the same position as IU this year is. I wouldn't expect the talent level to be drastically different. If you can go into East Lansing and get a win, this is where I think IU really sets up, because you get Michigan and Ohio State the 2 weeks after that game. If you can pull off a win in East Lansing, IU's feeling really good about itself going into this back stretch of the season.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I don't want to sit here and pencil in losses, but Michigan and Ohio State are going to be tough games. I mean, you could play well and go 0-2, and Ohio State might be the most talented team in the country this year. I mean, they're loaded like they are most years. So, that Michigan State game is another big one. Hopefully by then, if you lose, it's not a killer for your bowl chances. But at the same time, if you lose that game, you could be staring down a 3-game losing streak, which, for this program, a lot of these players are new, but there's still it's the whole everything around the program. You know how it is. You've been around this, Jared. People, a couple of losses in a row, and people, same old IU, even if it's to really good teams. So, I mean, we got to see how the season plays out. But yeah, that is a game. And in early November, it could be similar to that game a couple years ago where it was snowing like crazy, and it's crazy. I think IU fell way behind, and they got a long run from a long kick return from Jalen Lucas. And I can't remember the running back's name, the guy from Miami that had the long run in that game as well, the transfer from Auburn. That it could, yeah, that's it. Sorry. Yeah, thank you. He had that long run. So, it could be one of those kind of games where weather's a factor again. But yeah, this is, we talked about the schedule. As far as road games go, other than Ohio State, this is not a daunting schedule. It's really not. I mean, you got 3 teams that, are kind of in your same boat. Michigan State, especially, and UCLA with new coaches. So these are games that where you have a real legit shot. I mean, this is like I said, people think we're drinking the Kool-Aid. I'm not. I'm not predicting 10 wins, but I also would be shocked by 10 wins. I think between 6 and 10 wins is kind of where I see this season going for IU, and this is one of those games that can determine whether you're going to be at 6 or 7 or 8, 9, or 10.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Michigan State. For me, this game is really a prove it game because a lot can happen in the UCLA game, Big Ten opener. You have to go out to the West Coast, so there's a lot of different circumstances there. But once you get to this November 2nd game at Michigan State, you should have a very good idea of what your roster is, what your 2 deep is, what the scheme, the playbook, all that. You go into Michigan State and you can prove yourself. Okay, we are not, the same old IU that in the past has struggled on the road, even against teams our caliber. If IU can go in and prove that, you're not even for this season, but you're really setting yourself for the future. This is definitely, this is a different, kind of vibe around IU at that point in the year. All right, following Michigan State, you get Michigan and Ohio State, 2 games that IU is probably going to be huge underdogs in, like they are each season. But just coming out of these 2 games, Matt, even if IU does, lose both of them, it's tough that they get them back-to-back weeks. But even if IU does lose both of them, there's still something I think you can take out of it in that, IU looks more competitive in these games. IU doesn't, just lay down for Michigan and Ohio State because they're Michigan and Ohio State. I think you'll learn a lot about IU and about this new coaching staff, even if they come in losses.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, I would rather have Michigan at home and Ohio State on the road because I don't think quite honestly, where you play Ohio State doesn't matter because they're going to be so talented and they're better. And Michigan's got a lot of guys back. They are going to be a really interesting team for me to watch this year. We don't know. I know Sharon Moore went 3-0, but I mean, let's be honest. I don't want to say anybody could have coached them to 3-0, but that was a team that was absolutely focused on winning a national title. They had a ton of guys who came back for that sole purpose, and they were bound and determined to do it. And I think that was almost more a coach or a player-led team than even a coach-led team. Not taking away from those coaches, but now everything's on you. For Sean Moore, all the stuff off the field, you have to run the entire program. It's not just showing up and coaching the game or showing up to practice and then coaching the game on Saturday. Everything's on him. I mean, I think it'll be tough to win either game, but obviously, I think if you're going to pick one team that could upset, it would be Michigan. But I mean, both are going to be tough. Michigan's defense is going to be stacked. They got a bunch of guys on that are going to be NFL draft picks. It's going to be a really, really daunting game, and Ohio State, the same. So, hopefully you come out of that relatively healthy, good showing. And then, obviously you got like the Bucky game, which we'll talk about here in a sec.
Yeah, you made a good point with Michigan too. Yeah, they're one of the teams I'm really intrigued by this year because at that point in the season when IU gets them, I think what is it, week 10, I think it is. Third to last game of the regular season. At that point in the season, Michigan could have gone one of two ways at that point in the season. With everything shrouding them, there are reports that Sharon Moore could be suspended at some point this season. Obviously they have the show call or the notification of what is it, notification of penalties or whatever it was from the NCAA. So a lot of that is clouding them. So at this point in the season, you could really see a Michigan team that's either kind of struggling to stay above water, or a Michigan team that's really proved everybody wrong and has really gone on a run there. Even in 2 losses, even if IU does not take the Michigan and Ohio State game, like I'm guessing the odds are going to have them at. I think you'll still learn a lot about IU and kind of in terms of their competitive level. And obviously the talent level will not be on par with Michigan or Ohio State, but a lot of it will be telling about how you kind of fights in that game and competes for all 4 quarters. So we'll see how those two go. Moving on to the last week of the season, as always, the bucket game. IU hosts Purdue this season in Bloomington. IU hoping to get back at the bucket, Matt. Purdue was ranked last in the Big Ten, which was kind of shocking to me, but considering everything they lost this offseason, that's a game that IU should, depending on how the season shakes out, you like your chance of going in that game as favorites. And obviously winning the bucket just means a little bit more in this rivalry. In terms of in-state recruiting, recruiting the Midwest, just how important is this game for a first-year coaching staff to really establish themselves and show we are the power of the state.
Yeah, it's always a big game for in-state recruiting. It's Indiana's the new staff that has come in and done a pretty good job with in-state recruiting, even though they were pretty well behind. It's not like Kurt Zanetti was recruiting a ton of Indiana kids at JMU. So these 24 kids were already, they were kind of behind, but they were able to get on. And then in the 25 class, I should have said 25, I said 24, but it started to get on some of these 25 kids. And then it'll really be, to me, it'll be beneficial for the 26. And then obviously Purdue won that game last year, game that, Indiana could have easily have won. Can make the argument they probably should have won. But it just to kind of establish that and especially let's be honest, what he said at the basketball game when he was first hired, this is the game where you definitely want to try to go get that win. You got it at home and try to get the bucket back. You got 2 trophy games back on the schedule with the brass platoon and then obviously the bucket against Purdue, brass platoon against Michigan State. So, but the bucket's the one that everybody talks about and wants to get. So yeah, it's a big game. And especially if you're coming off, if our predictions are kind of on par and they're coming off 2 losses, you really want to, even if you're bowl eligible by this game, you don't want to finish on, where you're losing your last 3 or whatever it may be and kind of going into the not off season, but into the bowl prep, hopefully on kind of a down note. So, you'd like to get this win. And Purdue's interesting. They got their quarterback back, but they lost their top receiver, lost the D end who was a stud, Nick Scorton. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Went to A&M, who was fantastic and is being projected as a high draft pick next year after the season. So, they've recruited the portal. Their portal strategy is a little bit different. They seem to go for the guys that are kind of maybe higher profile out of high school, but maybe haven't played as much. Kind of the Tom Allen way of doing it. And I'm not saying it's wrong or right, but Cignetti has been more on, I'll go for the guy from the smaller school, Old Dominion, JMU, wherever it may be, but he's really got 2 or 3 years of production. So it'll be interesting. Those guys with talent can pan out, but there's also a reason why maybe they haven't gotten on the field in 2 or 3 years at the school they were at. So it'll be interesting, but Purdue's going to come in and play hard and play well because it's a rivalry game. It doesn't matter. That's one of those games you throw the records out. I've been around this program since I was very young, and I've seen some good Indiana teams look bad against Purdue, and I've seen some bad Indiana teams beat Purdue. So you just never know. It's a bucket game, and then obviously weather can also play a part that late in the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for Purdue, for a team that's projected to be last in the Big Ten, and obviously looking to make a statement, this could be a game for them. Most seasons we've seen it where it's both teams are going into that game 5-6, or sorry, five, looking to get to bowl eligibility. For Purdue, at this point in the season, you hope IU has bowl eligibility locked up. But for Purdue, it could be a game where they could be sitting at 5 wins, looking to really get get to bowl eligibility there, and really prove a lot of people wrong. So a lot of people don't have Purdue, projected to do too well this season. But like you said, the bucket game, everything that it means to both programs, it's always going to mean a little bit more, and I think you'll see that kind of on the field. So we'll see how it goes.
Real quick on Purdue, just looking at their schedule. I mean, they got Notre Dame, Oregon, at Ohio State, and Penn State. I mean, you're staring at 4 losses before you even start your season. So they got to go 6-2 in the other 8 games. So yeah, it could be tough. And they also got to go to Wisconsin. They got to go to Oregon State. So their schedules. It's kind of flipped. They can live the life that Indiana's been living for the last several years. So it's the way it goes.
Yeah, that is brutal that they had scheduled Notre Dame and Oregon State this season, which for a program that's looking to get in their second year under Ryan Walters, trying to get their legs under them, that is certainly a choice to schedule 2 tough non-con games this season. All right, Matt, we've made it through the regular season. Let's get into predictions here. Maybe we'll go about it 2 ways. What do you think IU's win floor is this season? What do you think their ceiling is? And then what do you think they ultimately end up at?
I honestly think their floor is 6-6. I really do. I think this is the way the schedule sets up. I think quite honestly, anything less than 6 wins is going to be a disappointment. And and I think their ceiling, I honestly think their ceiling is 10 wins. I think there's only 2 games on the schedule where I say, even if they play well, it's going to be really hard to get wins. I think if they play well in the other 10 games, it doesn't mean you're going to win all 10 of them. Football, things can happen, but you have a legit shot to win every game. And let's be honest, this is a team that last year had 4 or 5 1-score losses. And I'm including Penn State. Penn State was a 9-point game, but it wasn't a 9-point game. Indiana got the safety late, but Indiana had a chance to tie that game up or win it after the pick, in the 4th quarter. And they had other games. I mean, Illinois, there was a bunch of close games that if you have some just a little bit better game management, a little bit better in-game coaching, a little bit better prepared team, you can win some of these games. And if you just win, I mean, let's be honest, if Indiana just wins half of those games, or 3 of those games, we're not talking about Kirk Cinetti as the coach at Indiana. Tom Allen's still the coach if they go 6-6 last year. So they were close. It's weird. They were close, but yet they were so far away at the same time. So, I think 6-6, I'm going to go 8-4. I think they're going to split the difference. And I think I'm going to go 8-4, for the season. And maybe I'm being overly optimistic, but I really do think, the mentality and the culture and the attitude that Cinetti and his staff have brought in are going to make the difference in a couple of these closer games, and they're going to be able to get some of these wins that they haven't been able to get the last 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you had mentioned previously, a lot of at least the outsiders, the national guys, kind of look at IU and say, oh, they're drinking the Kool-Aid this year, 1st-year coaching staff, roster turnover, all that. There's no way they could go out and win 8 games. But I think a lot of people have not really took a chance, or taken a deep dive into IU's schedule this year and how it sets up. The more I've looked at the schedule, the harder I see, the more difficult it is for me to wrap my head around them not making a bowl game. Like, I think a lot would have to go wrong. Now, I'm not saying, say they finish season 5-7, which is kind of on par with where IU has traditionally been, 1st-year coaching staff. If they go 5-7, I don't think that's going to be a huge shock to, it'll be a huge shock to Indiana fans, but maybe not the national guys, and those like from, looking at the program from the 30,000-foot view. But the more I look at the schedule, it really is hard for me not to find 6 wins here. I think a lot would have to kind of go wrong, injuries, what have you. Maybe Curtis Rourke doesn't, perform to the level that people think, but a lot of circumstances would have to go against IU to not at least get to 6 wins here. And a lot of these games, like we've mentioned, a lot of these games are very winnable. They're going to be a lot of toss-up games in here. And I think I'm right with you. I think I had IU the last time I did the predictions on my own. Think I had them at 7-5. And if you're 7-5 under a first year staff with as many new guys as you have, I think that's overwhelmingly a success considering where IU's been the last 3 years under Tom Allen and that staff. Matt, I did want to ask, with all these toss-up games, what is there one in your mind that Indiana, could, has the best chance of upsetting here if you're going to pick an upset?
Well, I mean, the two games where you feel pretty confident they're going to be a pretty big underdog is Michigan and Ohio State. Like I said, if I had to pick between those two, I would pick Michigan. The toss up games, I mean, I don't know. The UCLA line will be interesting. They're going to play Hawaii this week, and then they're off before they play Indiana. I would assume you give 3 points. Was it usually about 3 points to the home team, no matter what? I would assume that they'll probably be a little bit of a favorite. Um, Nebraska or Washington, those are two. Now that'll be later in the season, so it depends on how their seasons are going. But if Nebraska's playing pretty well, I could see them coming into Indiana and being a touchdown favorite. I would probably maybe pick that as a game I would call a mild upset. I guess that's mild if you're about a touchdown underdog or right around there, one score underdog. But the really tough games. I mean, like I said, I'm not saying they're going to upset Michigan, but I think their chances are better in that one than going into the horseshoe. The one thing you have going that week is Ohio State's got Michigan the following week. And so they could be a little bit looking past Indiana. Still saying that though, their talent is just so superior, not just Indiana, but to basically everybody. I mean, they're arguably the most talented team in the country. So that's going to be a really difficult game, but you never know. It's college football, crazy things happen. But I would say of the kind of toss up games, maybe Nebraska, because I'm saying they might be after Michigan, Ohio State. I don't know. Is it fair to say they might be the third best team on the schedule? Maybe, just based on the preseason prognostications. I don't know.
At least talent wise.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that'll definitely be interesting. Those two games, especially because you get both of those games at home, Nebraska and Washington. You do. All right, Matt. If we're gonna look at this from maybe the Devils, the negative side of things, maybe a little bit. Guys that think 5-7 maybe is for a first year coaching staff wouldn't be the worst thing. Even if you go 5-7, but you look respectable in those games. For you, say Indiana goes 5-7, right? Is that a disappointing season for you?
Well, I guess it kind of depends on how it plays out. I mean, if you have some injuries, I think if this team stays relatively healthy and you go 5-7, to me, I'll be a little bit disappointed because like I said, I think 6 wins is very doable and kind of the floor. But if there's some things that happen along the way that you can't control, and injuries is obviously one of them, and maybe some of these teams are just better than we think. Maybe some of them, have made more of a jump than we expected. Like in today's portal age with rosters turning over at a 35-40% clip, which is just insane. It's just hard to say, but I think I will be a little bit disappointed, but if Curtis Rourke, knock on wood, it doesn't happen. If he goes down in week 1 or week 2 or something, and nothing against Taven Jackson, but now you're playing with a guy who doesn't have quite the experience and obviously wasn't the first choice to play quarterback. That could change things, but I think it'll be a little bit of disappointment. But if you have 7 wins where it's right there to the end and you play well and you just, something quirky happens and you lose those games, I know that the staff and Kirstenetti's not going to be okay with that, but as long as you're showing progress, you're getting better. What I'm looking for is you get better from the start of the season to the end of the season. And that you're showing progress and it's tangible and you can see it. And I think if they do that, I really think they'll get more than 5 wins. But that's the biggest thing: show progress and that this program's heading in the right direction. Because in 21, it was obvious this program was going back down the hill, and the slide never stopped and until you got rid of Tom Allen. And that's what they did. So that's what I'm looking for. There's a foundation to build on for the next 3 or 4 years. You're going to be a really competitive team that is going to be going to bowl games.
All right, let's get into. I did want to talk about breakout picks a little bit. Now, I will give the caveat: no Curtis Rourke on offense, no D'Angelo Pons on defense, because those two guys are probably the ones that everyone's thinking about. Breakout picks on offense and defense for you.
Offense, I'm going to go Omar Cooper. I talked about him earlier. I think he's going to be a guy that is maybe has a bigger role. And the only reason why I think people may not expect him just because they have so many older guys. They brought in all those transfers, and then you have McCauley back. You mentioned EJ Williams. Even Anderson Kobe, who has not done a ton, but he is an older guy who's been around college football, was at Tennessee. Guys like that. So, but I think Omar Cooper's the guy. He's my breakout. Defensively, I'm going to go Amari Farrell. I think Amari Farrell, I think he's going to play that rover spot. He's a guy that he's athletic. He's got size to him. And I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be an impact player for him on defense.
For me, I think I'm going to go a little bit different route here on offense. I think one of the three interior guards that are kind of competing, I think one of those three breaks out this year. And especially for the long-term future when you're looking at IU and how they're building this offensive line, you really do need a guy like Bray Lynch or Drew Evans who has multiple years of eligibility left. You really do need one of those guys to take a jump. So I'll go with Bray Lynch there because I think a lot of us have him maybe a little bit higher up in the pecking order than Drew Evans. Now, obviously, we'll see what happens on game day when they take the field. I'll go with Bray Lynch there. He's maybe an unconventional pick on offense, but for IU, you'd really like to have a guy like that really step up and show that he can kind of take the starting reins over the next few years. And then on defense, this is a guy that I don't think a lot of people are talking about, but I think the additions on the defensive line will help a lot. I'm going Marcus Burris. I think we've seen his potential, and you've said in the past, the previous coaching staff thought he had the best, if not one of the best NFL potentials on the team in terms of raw athleticism, size, and he last year he had to do a lot what's expected of him because of what IU did not have at defensive tackle. But now that you have CJ West, now you have James Carpenter, I don't think a lot of expectations will be on his shoulders, and he's going into his redshirt junior year, I believe it is. This is a prove it year for him to really take that next step and show, the recruit I was in high school, I can still become that. I can still grow into that. And, I'm really high on Pat Kuntz and his ability to develop talent on that side of the ball. And one shot I will give too, I do think one of the cornerbacks will take a step up. Jamari Sharp last year struggled a little bit. We saw that, but that was his first full season as a redshirt freshman in a starting role. IU's going to need one of those cornerbacks to step up for the future. And if you're looking at one of them, it's going to be either JoJo Johnson, Jamari Sharp. We don't expect the freshman to play a lot. I like Jamari Sharp a lot too. He probably won't get a ton of snaps this year just because of Pons and Jameer Johnson and those guys. But I'm looking at him too to really take the next step in his development. All right, Matt. To wrap things up here, going into week 1 against FIU, just a whole lot of turnover, just so much chaos happened this offseason. For you, just when you go through the season as a whole, when we look back on this 2024 season, just what is going to constitute success for you aside from obviously the wins and the bowl games on the field?
Well, like I said, just a sound football team. I was on the Fan this morning, and they asked what I thought would be different about Indiana this year compared to last year. And I went back and looked at it. Indiana last year was 10th in both penalties committed and turnover margin. JMU was second, I think, in penalties. So, what I'm saying is the amount of penalties you commit. So they didn't commit a lot of penalties. They were second. I can't remember if they were in turnover margin, but they were top. And I'm talking the Sun Belt, second in the Sun Belt, and they were high up. That, to me, that's a big deal. When you don't have the talent, not that Indiana doesn't have good talent, but when you don't have elite talent across the board, you can't make and we've sat in the press box and said you can't have self-inflicted wounds in the games. You're going to make mistakes. There's going to be penalties. You're going to have some turnovers. Nobody's perfect, but it's those critical turnovers that lead, that they become pick sixes, or they're turnovers that lead directly to points. You know what I mean? Or you have a penalty where you get a big play and it gets called all the way back because somebody made a mistake, or pre-snap penalties that put you at 1st and 15 or whatever it may be. Those kind of things. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a sound, disciplined football team that even they don't make a ton of mistakes, but when they do, they bounce back and they don't make the same ones over and over again. Because that's what we were seeing the last few years. A lot of the same mistakes over and over again that weren't getting corrected. And I think that's something we will see. I don't think Kirk Cinetti's teams, he's just not going to stand for it. His staff's not going to stand for it. And if you can't play the way he wants you to play, you're going to get, and the players have been saying that. We heard that a bunch on Big Ten Media Day. If you don't play the way they want you to play, you're not going to play. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for accountability too. I felt like accountability was not there the last couple of years under Tom Allen. Guys were allowed too much rope that were making critical mistakes because they were older players. I don't think that's going to be the case anymore going forward. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a football program that looks like a Big Ten football program.
Yeah, and everything we've heard this offseason from Curt Cignetti is that is fully what he intends to do, win this season and really build this thing, from the ground up right away. All right, Matt, that'll do it for our week 1 podcast. We're going to do a lot more of these during the season. We want to do at least one of these a week, so you guys can be on the lookout for that. You'll be able to hear from us much more throughout the week. If you want to check out all our offseason content, you can go on Peegs.com. We have it all there. We're always on the boards interacting with everybody, but we've made it game week. The Curt Cignetti era is finally here. FIU versus Indiana at Memorial Stadium, 3:30 p.m. this Saturday. We'll have much more to say after that game, obviously, and leading into it. But for now, Matt Weaver, Jared Kelly, we'll see you guys over on Peegs.com.